Hi people, it's me, Anya, and I'm here to help you get your first pet reptile. For the sake of my sanity, I'm going to be reviewing one reptile that I think is the best for beginners, the leopard gecko. So why leopard gecko? I think leopard geckos are the most tame reptiles you get in this industry. Somewhat tame. Leopard geckos are really cute, they don't jump like crested geckos, and they're pretty much easy to handle at times. I'm going to be talking about 5 things you need to know about leopard geckos. Number 1, tank setup. Number 2, care. Number 3, handability. And number 4, behavior. And number 5, cost. First, let's talk about the tank setup, aka the enclosure. Leopard geckos live in tanks, and they have a desert themed tank. Does that mean you have sand in your tank? No. Big no-no in the reptile industry is sand. Never put sand in a gecko's tank. Or, for that part, any reptile tank. Sand causes impaction, which kills your gecko. Remember, no sand. Now that we got sand out of the way, let's talk about what size tank you need for your gecko. A 20-gallon to a 40-gallon tank is a great size. For your gecko, I say 30 to 40. The bare minimum is a 10-gallon tank, and even then, I say a 10-gallon tank is more for juvenile geckos. And as they grow bigger, they need a bigger tank. When your gecko starts to show this dance, usually this means that they need a bigger enclosure. Now let's talk about the substrate for the tank. Now, like I said, never use sand, but you can use one thing that is more natural looking than sand, which is Eco Earth. Eco Earth looks like this and is the #1 substrate people use for their reptiles. Now, if you don't want to have dirt for your tank, you can use a more clean and modern look, which is paper towels. Yes, paper towels. No, they are not shredded up paper towels. That is not what we need. We need a simply flat paper towel. Now, there are also reptile carpets, which I don't recommend, personally, because gecko nails get stuck on the carpet, their teeth get stuck on the carpet, and carpets are extremely messy. They look like this. I've had carpets before, pretty ucky, and they're hard to clean. Honestly, the best recommendation for flooring for your gecko tank is, in fact, tile. Tile is very pretty, it's very clean, and overall won't harm your pet. Geckos need heat, not above them, but underneath them. Geckos use heat mats for warmth. Now, when you have a heat mat, you're supposed to place it underneath the tank. It should have a sticky sticker thingy underneath the heat mat, which you slide underneath your tank and you put it down. Now, there are plenty of different heat mats you can buy. They cost around $14 to $11 maybe. But yeah, heat mats, you can have a thermostat with it to see like the temperatures, and you change the temperatures on the heat mat. There will be a video of me testing out heat mats for you guys. Geckos need light to tell night from day. So a nice light would help a gecko's tank. Plus it gives it a nice pretty color as well. It's not so dark and gloomy. You could also use your window light, but in the summertime the windows might get hot, so that means your tank gets a little hotter. Honestly, your gecko's tank should be a little ways away from the window, but if it is next to the window and you know it doesn't get too hot in the summertime, then it's fine. I recommend putting plants in your tank just because it's a very nice, pretty view for your gecko and offers more places to hide. Enough about plants though. Let's talk about where your gecko lives. Usually your gecko will be in their 3 hides: the warm hide, the cold hide, and the humid hide. Let's talk about hides. A hide is basically a gecko's house. You have the warm hide, which is on top of the heat mat. It's where the heat mat is. And then you have the cool hide, which is farthest away from the heat mat. And then you have the humid hide, which is usually in the center or wherever you want to put the humid hide. Hides are very important. Your gecko is a shy little guy. He wants to hide away in the depths in the dark. And that's okay. That's why you provide hides for your geckos. Humid hide usually looks like this. I DIY'd mine. Usually with a humid hide, you'd spray water in it, but you can make a cold hide into a humid hide as well, just by spraying water in the cold hide. Humid hides are very important because when your gecko starts to shed, they need a place to help them shed, which is humidity. Humidity helps shedding. Next is overall care. Now, people tend to think leopard geckos are an easy pet. No reptile is easy or simple. Leopard geckos are exotic pets. You can't just leave them in a tank for a week and feed them sometimes. That's why first I'll be talking about baby leopard geckos and how to care for a juvenile gecko. When you first get your leopard gecko, you need to put them in their new tank. When you buy your gecko, make sure you have a tank ready for them before you buy it. Once you put them in your tank, you leave them there for a day or two. Obviously, you feed them and whatnot, but just let them be and let them get used to their tank. Of course, you check up on them. When feeding a leopard gecko, you need to dust their food in calcium or vitamins, no matter what you feed them. For a baby leopard gecko, your feeding schedule will look like this. Baby leopard geckos eat about 5 to 7 worms every single day. So, I'd say dust it in calcium like the schedule shows, and then vitamin, calcium, vitamin, calcium, vitamin, and keep going off of that. Once your baby gecko reaches 10 to 12 months, you switch over to every other day feeding schedules. So, 7 to 10 mealworms or crickets every other day. So, mine is every 2 days I feed him around 10 mealworms, and that's how Elton eats his food. Another thing about feeding is to never, and I mean never, leave live food in your gecko's tank. Crickets and worms can and will eat your geckos. They can bite and harm your pets, so never leave live food in a gecko or any lizard tank. So you got your gecko fed, and it's in its new home. Now what? Well, that's the thing about leopard geckos. They don't like you. Leopard geckos take about 2 to 3 weeks to bond, and which means pretty much a waiting game. The best way to bond with your gecko is for them to learn your scent, for them to know that you're not dangerous and you're not going to hurt them. A few ways you can bond with your gecko is feeding them. Feeding your gecko is the best way to bond. They will know that you give them food and that you're not trying to harm them. If your gecko seems stressed out and afraid of you, which means they lift their tail up like this, it means just stay away. Basically, what you have to do is stay away from your gecko. Walk away from your gecko, give them some time by themselves, and try again later. You don't want to stress your gecko out because leopard geckos can drop their tails. It's less likely to happen, but they can drop their tails if they are stressed or afraid enough to. And when they do drop their tails normally don't grow back the right way. So let's just hope they don't drop their tail ever. Another way to bond with your gecko is to hold them. Let them crawl onto your hand. Now, with baby geckos, it's going to be a little harder to pick them up since they're a little skittish and they tend to zoom, or noom is what we call it, so they go really fast. So I would say try scooping your gecko up, like shown in the video, and holding them, like that. Now, geckos can bolt, and they will bolt if they are babies, and sometimes adults too. You just have to have your hands ready to catch them and ready to, you know, hold them. Another way to have your gecko bond with you is to hand feed them. Not with tweezers, but with your hand. So they can smell your hand and smell that you're giving them food. Once your gecko is trying to bond with you and they start to know that you're okay and you're not going to harm them, put your hand in the tank near your gecko and see if they crawl in your hand and let them lick your hand mostly. Just smell your hand with their tongues. Gecko bonding takes time and you have to be patient. It is hard, but it pays off after a while. So let's talk about handability and hardiness. Leopard geckos are pretty easy to hold and are pretty tame most of the time. Most of the time. When a leopard gecko is a juvenile, they tend to bolt more than an adult would. And hey, sometimes adult geckos might bolt in your hand if they are crazy like that. Most geckos, though, are pretty tame, at the most part. So let's talk about juvie baby geckos. They tend to be more skittish and more scared because they don't really know you that well, and they're also baby. You kind of have to be gentle with them and be as careful as ever with your hands and how you handle them. Don't let them run around the house and just try to be as careful as possible with the baby. Adult geckos, though, they kind of laze around. They mostly just enjoy the warmth of your hand and they don't really move that much. When it comes to hardiness, leopard geckos are quite hardy. They are pretty okay with children from what I've seen with my gecko. Just make sure the children don't press too hard on the gecko when petting him. Geckos are quite lazy, so they kind of laze around. So a child might be able to touch the gecko pretty well. Just make sure there's adult supervision with the child in the presence of a gecko. That's all for today's video. I hope you learned a lot about leopard geckos, and I hope you want a leopard gecko too. I missed out a few things, but that's okay. I'll make other videos on certain subjects like bone disease and other really important things for your gecko.